You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Coming up, as Russia escalates its showdown with Europe and cuts off gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria, what next for Germany? Acrid smoke blankets Delhi as a record-shattering heatwave smothers India. A face mask for cows and aerodynamic seed pods will bring you the latest in high-impact climate solutions. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show where we track the changes happening to our world. We hear from the people being hit hardest by those changes and report on the race for solutions. Now, Europe's relationship with Russia moved into a new and critical phase today as Russian energy giant Gazprom cut off gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria. Both are heavily dependent on their eastern neighbour for energy, but refuse to pay in rubles, as Russia has requested. We'll have more details on precisely how much Europe depends on Russia for its energy a little later. But both Poland and Bulgaria reacted angrily, saying the Russians had breached their contracts.
The
suspension of Gazprom's gas is a gross violation of their contract and blackmail by using a non-contractual plan to pay in rubles through third parties, which does not guarantee neither the supplies nor the Bulgarians' money. We will not succumb to such a racket.
Well, the EU has also described Russia's actions as blackmail and a provocation. And the EU Commission President confirmed there is a plan to fully wean the continent off Russian fossil fuels.
We've been working since months to reduce this dependency, and it pays off now. We have reduced already the flow of gas coming from Russia, and with the plans I've just displayed, we will be able to get independent of Russian fossil fuels much faster, and this is for good and forever.
Now, Germany is Europe's most heavily industrialised country and as such imported more than 50% of its gas from Russia in 2021, which places it in a very awkward position. Our climate correspondent, Hannah Thomas-Peter, is in Berlin.
The energy crisis is, of course, having an impact well beyond the issues of oil and gas. Amongst many Western nations, there's real concern that globally countries are turning away from or deprioritising their climate change commitments as they focus on securing energy supplies. And even within Germany, that is the case. The truth is, it doesn't have a nuclear infrastructure or programme to plug any gap left by Russian oil and gas. It is turning to nations like Qatar and others to find more gas, potentially locking in a fossil fuel infrastructure for the years to come that it had said it hoped it would never need. And it hasn't ruled out burning more coal to create more power so that people can heat their homes and do other things. The practical reality of the effects of what Russia is doing is being felt in even the richest, most powerful nations, and Germany is no exception.
Well, let's look in some more detail now on how Russian gas supplies go into Europe. Here's our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
Let's start by reminding ourselves where Europe gets its gas from at the moment. And you can see there's one place that sticks out. It's Russia ahead of Norway, Algeria and Netherlands. It's an enormous reliance. And when you take that bar and break it down to the countries where that gas is received, again, there's another one that sticks out. Let me put these side by side so you can see that Germany is by far and away the biggest recipient of Russian gas, followed by Italy, Turkey, Netherlands and the rest. Within this others, that's where Poland and Bulgaria are to be found. And what's happened here ultimately is this. At the moment, the payments for that gas that's coming in go in euros back to Russia. And Russia has said, no, we'd rather have it in rubles. That's a symbol for rubles. And both of these countries have said no thanks. And as a result, gas prices, these are wholesale gas prices in the Netherlands, they've gone up quite sharply. That's up by about 20%, although it's come down a little bit. Although you can see in the scheme of things, you know, it has been a lot higher in previous weeks. But why has it come down? Why are people not quite as concerned about it? Well, it partly is down to charts like this. This shows you Polish gas storage. So over the last few years, how much gas there is in storage. It goes down during the winter and then gets built up over the summer and the autumn. And just look at what's happened recently with Poland. Up very high. It's almost like they knew something was coming. So they've got a lot of gas in storage in Poland. Also, consider what's going on with these pipelines. It's mostly pipelines bringing the gas from Russia into Europe. And when you look at those pipelines, well, Poland is building new LNG terminals, liquefied natural gas, to bring in the gas via its coastline. Whereas in Bulgaria, they have a new pipeline that's potentially coming in from Greece, and that's bringing in gas from Azerbaijan. So they both have alternatives in the future. But if we look at these pipelines in particular, let's focus on two of them. So Nord Stream, that's the pipe that goes into Germany, directly into Germany. Yamal Europe, it's a series of pipelines that goes through to Poland. So that's the one for Poland, Yamal. And look at how much gas there's been recently into that Yamal pipeline. In recent months, it's been really low. So it's not like this changes all that much for Poland. But Nord Stream, the pipeline that goes into Germany, just look at how much gas has been flowing through that, which brings us back to where we started, really. It's all about Germany, it's about Italy, it's about Turkey, it's about these countries and whether they want to pay in rubles rather than euros. It is going to be a very interesting next few weeks.
Well, let's get some of the day's other climate news now. And an extraordinary heat wave has been blamed for causing a fire at a massive landfill in New Delhi, blanketing the city in smoke. The fire, which has been burning since Tuesday, is adding more toxic smoke to a city that's already plagued by life-threatening pollution. India suffered the hottest March in over a century, and there are warnings of record temperatures over the next few days. Now, £220 million worth of Russian oil has arrived in Britain via tankers since the start of the war in Ukraine. The UK government has banned Russian-operated ships from docking in UK ports, but ships flying other flags are allowed to import Russian fossil fuels. Greenpeace, who carried out the analysis, say the ban on Russian ships is tokenistic. Now, more than 1/5 of reptile species are threatened with extinction. That is according to a global assessment of more than 10,000 species published in Nature. Crocodiles and turtles are among the most at-risk species, with more than half of those assessed being under threat. The report authors warn that logging, urban development and invasive species are the main threats to reptiles. And human-caused climate change will make strong tropical cyclones twice as frequent by 2050. That's according to new research from the University of Southampton, which predicts maximum wind speeds in cyclones could increase by 20%. These extreme weather events could occur more often in places where currently they are normally rare, such as Cambodia, Laos and Mozambique. Now, a face mask for cows, aerodynamic seed pods and capturing waste from our tyres. 3 of the winners of the inaugural Terracotta Design Lab competition. It's aimed at discovering low-cost, high-impact climate solutions. Rhiannon Mills reports.
The Royal College of Art, a real birthplace of the unusual, now harnessing all of that creative thinking to take on some of the planet's most pressing problems. It's something that Prince Charles has wanted to encourage as he met the first 4 teams, getting £50,000 each from his Terracotta Design Award. A mask for cows to cut methane, one that he could not miss. And no, all of that gas does not come from where you think.
More than 90% of the methane that actually comes from the animal is expelled from the nostrils of cattle. And that's why our product is so precisely located to capture this methane on top of the nostrils of the animal.
There's also the team trying to capture the waste from our tyres.
It's a huge problem, and it's one that we can't think about trying to tackle purely on our own. So it's always about reaching out to collaborators, the likes of Johnny Ive and His Royal Highness, to work out how we can actually bring this product from a concept into fruition.
And the Iascan twins, art students, now working on how food waste like orange peelings can spread seeds.
The idea is to use aerodynamic forms that are dispersed by the wind, like it happens in nature. There's a few seeds like the maple seeds that use the helicopter-like shape to fall down on Earth.
Whether it's Prince Charles or Prince William, there has been a shift recently, not just talking about the dangers of what we're doing to our planet, but also making sure that these kind of innovative ideas are getting the support that they need to really make sure that they go somewhere in the future. Sir Johnny Ive, the former chief designer at Apple, is now mentoring the winners, invaluable support for the new innovators whose ideas have never been more urgent. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News in central London.
Well, do stay with us. Coming up, I'll be joined by climate activist Laura Young and Michael Jacobs, Professor of Political Economy at the University of Sheffield. We'll be discussing, yes, of course, fossil fuels and some more of those climate solutions.
And it's moving this way.
And over there is Dover.
We track the changes happening to our world right now.
I think it's a procession of the Taliban. There they are, right here.
Would you, as Prime Minister, be able to look them in the face?
Let's have a look at both of those two things.
I just want to say thank you for having the courage to speak to us.
We do genuinely believe in what we do, to show the truth.
I thought there was an astonishing story there.
Independent United Kingdom.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child's stuff in a black sack and just say, I don't want to.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account. I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families. But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Well, let's get straight into some of those climate issues in the news today. We've had the climate activist Laura Young and Michael Jacobs from the University of Sheffield. A very good evening to both of you. Michael, coming to you first. When we look at the price effect of what happens when Russia cuts off Bulgaria and Poland from its gas, what would happen if Russia cut Germany off?
Well, I've been looking at a few of the studies. As you can imagine, quite a lot of economists, including from the German government, have been looking at this question. And the study that seems to me to have modelled this in a pretty good way suggests that if the Germany has to import oil, gas and coal from countries other than Russia, that there will be price rises, that will be more expensive, but that the total hit to German GDP would be less than 1%, which equates to about 80 to 120 euros, so that's, let's call it a pound to a euro, that kind of sum of money per German citizen on average. Obviously will depend on different people's consumption. So that's not a huge hit, but it's also not something clearly which German politicians particularly want to inflict on German citizens. So this is why Germany has not yet decided to boycott or abandon Russian imports of energy, despite the much more the urgent requests of President Zelensky and the Ukrainian government for them to do so.
Yeah, it's not quite as united a front as the EU would have us believe. But it wouldn't just affect German energy consumers, would it? It has a wider effect, Michael.
Yes, the imports coming into Europe from Russia, particularly of oil and gas, go to most European countries. The UK is the exception. We have very little. France has very little because it has such a big nuclear program. But Poland, Bulgaria, which today have been told that their gas is being cut off by Russia because they are refusing to pay in rubles, also import a lot. So this is a big issue for European countries, and it is the much more difficult issue than supplying arms. That is obviously very expensive for the West to supply arms to Ukraine, but the much more difficult issue politically is the cost to European citizens and businesses of boycotting or abandoning Russian imports. The particular problems will be on price. There is enough oil and coal and gas in the world to supply those countries. It's not like there will be shortages, at least not, there might be initially, but it is a price problem, and obviously prices are already very high. And as you can imagine, if this were going on in the UK, there would be plenty of people saying, well, we do support Ukraine, but not quite that much.
Yeah,
we don't want to bear that cost, and that is a difficult political choice.
On that very point, will consumers here end up wearing those costs? Will they be happy to wear those costs, Laura?
They will. And I don't think it's necessarily a question of will they. I think we are already seeing people having to take on those costs. We are seeing it here in the UK, and we need to look at this as a global issue, and we need to look out for our neighbours, no matter what country they're from. And it is regular, everyday people that are going to be feeling this cost, taking the brunt on. And we're going to see more countries having the same dilemmas that we're having right now, where some of the poorest people are having to choose between heating and eating. And we are going to see a global unintended consequence, and many of them, for people's health and for the environment. And so this is definitely something that comes down to being a justice issue. And we need to have those in power, governments, taking steps to take that away from everyday people, and to come up with a plan that takes the brunt off of everyday people when it comes to the cost of this.
Yeah, well, the cost push through, though, I mean, there doesn't seem to be much political will, certainly not in the UK, to impose a windfall tax on the energy companies, does there, Laura?
No, and actually Michael and I were on this very show in January discussing the fact that a windfall tax is something that could have been implemented and could have taken a little bit of pressure, particularly we were talking about in a UK context, of some of the people who are already being hit the hardest. You only need to go online to hear the stories of how much people's energy bills have already risen, and that is something that's going to keep happening this year. And although we're going into summer months and people are turning off their heating because it's getting warmer, it's going to be something that we see. And so the fact that we are now, however many months that is, 3 months on, and it's still something, a windfall tax, that should be looked at. And we need to be looking at, has anyone else in the world done anything? We did see that France implemented a kind of hit to EDF, who are the big energy company there, and limited the amount that energy bills could rise to 4%. And that was something that happened at the same time we were discussing a windfall tax. We didn't go down that route. We are now seeing the consequences of that, but it's not too late to still think about these solutions, and these are solutions that need to come from the top down.
Michael, talking about weaning themselves off Russian oil and gas, is this going to be a boost for investment in the renewables market, or will we simply see it being replaced with fossil fuels from elsewhere?
In the very short term, it probably will be replaced by fossil fuels. There are other places to get oil and gas and, in fact, coal. And Germany and the other European countries that are going to have fewer Russian imports will first go to other fossil fuels. But it will also stimulate more investment in renewables. I don't think there's any question that this crisis has strengthened Europe's ambition to reduce its emissions, that people are seeing that the climate impacts are an important part of the security issue that Europe now faces. And of course, it will also encourage, quite quickly, I think, energy saving. This is much the cheapest, much the quickest way of reducing dependence on overseas energy supplies. And of course, it saves money to consumers and businesses. So I think there will be a big push on energy efficiency, insulating homes and buildings and so on, and also energy storage of various kinds, particularly electricity storage, which is a developing technology. So I think we will see this as a moment when the move, which has already started to shift the energy system in Europe towards renewables and energy saving, is accelerated. And it's a terrible price that we've had to pay, or not us, the Ukrainians have had to pay if that is the case, but it could be a silver lining of the terrible circumstances that we're now witnessing in that country.
OK, well, let's shift gear somewhat. A face mask for cows. Well, that is one climate solution that I certainly didn't see coming. The science, of course, though, is serious. Methane from agriculture is responsible for huge amounts of global warming. So what other low-cost, high-impact climate solutions should we be looking at? Laura, I'm going to come first to you. I mean, once we stop laughing about this notion of face masks for cows, you can actually see that there is a lot of sense behind it, can't you?
Can we? Am I allowed to roll my eyes? I'm not sure. One of the things that I would maybe like to bring up, thinking about cows and cattle and meat in particular, is one of the big things that we often don't think about is food waste. And some statistics from WRAP, who are a waste organisation, actually shows that 240,000 tonnes of meat, so kind of beef, poultry, that sort of thing, are actually wasted, which represents about 10% of what we buy. And food waste globally has a huge footprint, carbon footprint. And that is something that we could be tackling instead of putting a face mask on a cow, which I think is a little bit questionable. And I think we should be looking at lots of low-hanging fruit when it comes to climate solutions, reducing food waste, getting rid of ghost flights, thinking about insulating homes and buildings, and really investing in public transport.
All right, well, that's certainly one suggestion. Where do you see low-hanging fruit, Michael?
Well, I think that methane is really critical, but we should be looking at the largest sources of it. Cows are one, so that's an interesting development there. Gas flaring is another one. The oil and gas sector waste a huge amount of methane by flaring, that is by setting fire to waste methane rather than capturing it. We need to be capturing it better from landfill sites around the world. So there are other places that methane can be captured. My particular kind of interest in this has been sparked, or interest in solutions, been sparked by an idea that I read about recently called enhanced rock weathering. A difficult name, but it basically means sprinkling rock dust on agricultural land to capture the carbon that emerges from it. And the reason why I think this is so interesting is because even though our primary method of tackling climate change must be to reduce the emissions, we are so far behind the timetable on doing that we will also need to find ways of capturing carbon and storing it. And the great advantage of the idea of sprinkling rock dust over the land, which can capture that carbon, is that it also helps fertilize the soil. So we have waste rock dust, which is already accumulating as a result of mining of rocks. So this is a resource which already exists and is a current waste. And we have a demand for it because it enhances soil fertility for farmers. So this seems to me to be a really interesting potential solution which could help carbon capture and could also help farmers and get rid of a waste that we otherwise don't really know what to do with.
Yeah, a true win-win solution there. Clever ideas. If only we could be looking more for them. Michael Jacobs, Laura Young, thank you very much, as ever, for your time on The Climate Show. Well, on the show tomorrow, we're going to be joined by Honorary Fellow at Oxford's Environmental Change Institute, Cece Hu, and Richard Black, who's founder of the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. But do stay with us, because coming up, following unpleasant stories of sexism, misogyny and harassment, Sophie Ridge takes a look at the biggest political stories of the week. Thanks for watching. See you next time.